What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Chris, this is 4K Motoring, and we've got a couple updates for the Corvette. I know it's been a little while since we had a Corvette video. We're gonna do a little minor upgrade here, kind of a small repair, but I wanna show you a couple of things that didn't quite make it to camera over the last couple of weeks. I know we've been slacking a little bit, been kind of busy with personal life stuff, but there's a lot more to come here this year with the Corvette, so stay tuned for that. Without further delay, let's go ahead and get into it. Without getting too deep into some of the overall changes that we made to the car last month or two, what I want to do today specifically is to repair our center console. Now this is a very common problem with C5 Corvettes. You'll notice the center console, it closes just fine. When it's closed, there's really no issue with it, but when it opens, it's supposed to open in a way that makes it free from this emergency brake handle here. So what's supposed to happen is that as this opens up, the whole thing will raise and not bind into this handle here. As we can see on our hinge, what should be a couple of these bars that basically lock on and keep the action parallel and the way it's supposed to be, they have broken. And that is a very common thing in these cars just because of the way everything articulates here in close spaces. We're going to replace that hinge today. We do have some minor tearing going on to our console lid as well. We have one of those ordered. It is not in yet. I'll go ahead and post a link to the one that we got down below. But that's a pretty easy process. That doesn't require a lot of extra stuff to happen. In order to get this hinge out, we're going to have to remove this console from the car. If you guys have watched any of my videos before, you've seen this at least a couple times. This thing's been in and out. It's a pretty easy job, especially when we're just removing this back piece and not touching the front. So I believe it's just a couple 10mm bolts. We'll have this thing out of here and swapped out pretty quick. We're gonna go ahead and get into it. So as this console is just flopping open instead of doing its lift and open like it's supposed to, we're gonna go ahead and remove the couple bolts holding this in. This is a pretty easy job. There's a couple panels right here in the back that are just little covers. You can take a screwdriver, small screwdriver to open them, or you can just literally flick them off, as I did, don't lose them. You're gonna have some 10mm bolts in here. The front bolts should slide out. They might need loosened a little bit. That's under this active handling panel here. Your car may have the F45 package, it may not, that really doesn't matter, but your active handling button will definitely be here. This is just a quick lift and pop out. There's a tension clip on both sides of this that hold it in, so as long as you put pressure kind of evenly on both sides, it will just pop out. We have a couple connectors in the back, but we don't really need to mess with them for this. All we're gonna do is these two 10mm bolts in here, we're just going to loosen them so this can slide out. I don't believe that it needs to come all the way out because it's just providing tension. So we're just going to loosen them up a little bit. So there is one connection that we're going to have to remove, and that is this cigarette outlet plug. And that's a pretty easy plug that just has one little tab on the top to remove it. You're just going to need a small pry bar to make that happen. Maybe even a set of keys could do it. Let's see. Yep. So it just has one little pin right on top that you've got to depress and it pulls out. That should give us a free kind of pull out. There we go with this. Now before you go yank it, we still have that fuel door button that we've got to unplug. We're going to close this to lock everything inside. And underneath here, we don't have a lot of room. Underneath, we're going to have one plug that's kind of awkward to get out. It's very easy, doesn't require tools, just requires you to go outward and then down with it. Let's get this out of the way. It's going to be this little bracket right here. Okay, once we have this console out of the car fully, we're going to be able to access this hinge pretty easily. The replacement part I have is from Contemporary Corvette. They have sent us what appears to be just a used module, a used hinge mechanism that, if you guys can see the actual pins on both sides, they're intact. Now when I got this, they were pretty bowed out, like they had been stressed before, because like I said, this is a pretty common thing. It's a design issue with it. I did, with very light force, bend these back so they're straight again, so hopefully this works as appropriate. We can see the screw holes that are in the top, and that matches the Phillips screw head bolts that are in the top of the cover. Then there's some bolts on the bottom. As we can see, there's 4 bolts. These are going to be an 8mm, or more appropriately a 5/16 nut that's on these bolts. They will come out. They've got thread locking ability on them already. They're going to come in from the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and do that first so we can get this lid off. Flip it over. And once it's flipped over, we can see on our side here, we've got our bolts. I am going to go ahead, we're replacing that lid, but we're not replacing this back. I'm going to put something on there so it doesn't get scratched up. And we're just going to loosen these bolts. And that is all 4. Set those aside. When we flip this over, the lid is only held on by this latch right now. We'll pull out, make sure we're straight. And now this whole latch mechanism will just come off. We'll set that aside. We'll be using that shortly. As I said, I do have another one of these coming. They are ordered. It's going to have an embroidered Corvette logo in the back, but still be a similar material without, you know, the rip in them. This is something that you should be able to take pretty easily to an upholstery shop as well. Even do it yourself. There's a couple screws that are holding the actual foam pad and the structure to the armrest itself. You can make that whatever you want really pretty easily. It's just these 5 screws should come off, and that's all you need. That'll be a later project for us. As for right now, we're just going to be removing these screws and then transferring in this latch. Okay. With these locating tabs in place, it makes it pretty easy to line up these screws. Go ahead and get a couple started here. These are typical GM screws. They are pretty soft. Do not put a lot of torque on them or you will ruin them and not get them out ever again. Okay, with those in, we just have our back plate on the hinge. We're going to take these nuts off of the bolts. So our hinge now is secured to the lid. We can put it in the retracted position. That's totally fine. Make sure everything has clearance, everything fits and lines up where it's supposed to. We're now going to find our posts and we're going to line them up. Once the whole thing is secured on here, we're going to make sure we keep pressure on it and flip it over. So here are our 4 bolts along this side. We're going to put the nuts on. I'm actually going to reuse, just because you can see the difference in quality from the stainless steel looking ones that were on mine and the brass ones that came with the new one. Stainless ones look a little bit better to me, so I'm going to reuse those. While we're working on this, I want to share with you one of the other things I plan on doing to this lid. I'm eventually going to, or at least this is my plan, remove part of the plastic here and install a wireless charging head to be under that. That way my phone can just be put in it and wirelessly charge. There's some heat related issues I got to work out, so as soon as I figure that out, we're going to have this out again. If on your car these side pieces, the sidebars on the front and rear, if they are not broken, but you notice any sort of bowing or anything like that, go ahead and take this hinge mechanism off like we've showed and go ahead and straighten those out, because that's going to create a much longer life for this part. As these start to bow, that's how you get these broken parts that were on my hinge. Now back in the car, this is going to be a quick reinstallation. Remember, we've got our fuel door plug and we've got our cigarette outlet plug that have to go back in, but the console itself should be ready to go. You have to work around the seats a little bit. We'll get our fuel door plug. We'll put that in. This is just a 2-pole plug. Very easy to work with. As soon as we do that, we can turn this console over to start getting it lined up with where it needs to be. So our fuel door plug is lined up. We're going to go ahead and connect our cigarette outlet plug. And now we're going to make sure that this console, the plastic, goes under the radio bezel console. That's how it's designed to slide in, and it will slide right underneath and find its home. Now when you open it, we're going to make sure that these screw holes have found the actual recesses, the holes to be mounted, and the whole thing should kind of secure itself in place. So we're going to do a reverse of what we did the first time. We're going to tighten down the front. We're going to go ahead and put the bolts in the rear and put those little covers over. That will be the end of this installation. Then finally we're going to put our little caps back on. And we're going to snap in, make sure all our plugs are still connected, snap in our active handling unit, just pops in, and we're done. You can see the motion of it now as it opens, where it actually pivots inward. And this is something we're going to keep an eye on because you can tell there's some friction on it, and that's why this is not really the best design of a part, especially with this type of metal. Installation really was that easy, just a 10mm and the 5/16 sockets. Little Phillips screwdriver, this can be done in no time. That console lid is a common problem with these cars, and there's lots of replacements. If you search on eBay, I'll link the ones below, the ones I ordered, just so you can see them yourself. I know it's been a little while since we posted on the Corvette. We've got some other stuff upcoming for it. In the meantime, you guys might have noticed that I did go ahead and do some fender stripes, the Grand Sport style fender stripes. I put them on, found a company that did the vinyl for it that was already pre-cut, at least for the overall width that you had to cut for shape. And overall, I really liked the way it turned out. It was very thin. It was a little difficult to work with, but it did come out well. We did go ahead and retint the car as well. We had, initially this car came from Texas, had 5% tint on it, which didn't quite pass here in North Carolina. Created quite a problem to get it inspected, but we've gone ahead and retinted, and overall, we're moving forward. As always, thanks for watching 4K Motoring. I'm Chris. We'll see you next time.